A few weeks ago, I posted a video about the data model in Excel, and I followed that up with a video that explained what DAX measures are. And then somebody asked me if I could do more videos about DAX. So that's what I'm doing in this video. I'm going to cover one of the most common DAX functions, calculate. Think of calculate as DAX's equivalent of SUMIFs or COUNTIFs. It lets you perform a calculation on data in the data model, but lets you specify criteria. If you want to follow along, as usual, you can download a copy of the practice file from the link in the description below. Here I have a pivot table that shows the revenue generated by each store, and the underlying data is in the data model. If I click on Power Pivot and then Manage, that will open up the data model. You can see here that one of the columns in the sales table is called Total Revenue, and it shows the revenue generated by each individual sale. And that's where the revenue is coming from for the pivot table. However, what I actually want to show in the pivot table is revenue per store, but only for the orders where the value in that total revenue column is over 100. That's why I've added a filter to the pivot table. If I click on the drop down in B1 and I click on All, what I'm seeing in this list is one instance of each value from that column in the data model. The problem with the filter is there's no way to specify over 100. I'd have to tick Select Multiple Items, and then I'd have to go through and one by one untick all those numbers that are under 100. And when the data is refreshed, I'd have to do it again. Putting the filter logic into a measure solves this problem. So I'm going to start by removing total revenue from the filters and also removing it from the values. And then to create a measure, I click on Power Pivot, Measures, New Measure. I need to give the measure a name. It would make sense to call it revenue over 100. And then I need to enter the formula itself. So I'm going to start by typing in calculate, which is the name of the function. The expression, which is the first argument of that function, is the actual calculation that I want to perform. In this case, add up the numbers in the total revenue column. So I use the sum function, just like you do in Excel, open brackets, and double click on sales total revenue. So I use the column name, but it also is preceded by the table name. Just double click on that and close brackets. Then I type a comma. That's just the argument separated, just like with Excel functions. And then I enter the criteria, which is where the value in the total revenue column is over 100. So if I start typing total revenue, it appears in the list and I can select it, double click it, greater than sign 100, and close the bracket. The measure will be added to the values section of the pivot, not the filter section. In fact, the filter section will be empty. The filter is built into the measure. Another benefit, a small benefit, but a benefit nevertheless, is that you can apply formatting to the values generated by the measure. Just saves doing it in the pivot table. So I'll click on number, I'll set the number of decimal places to 0, and then I can click on OK. Because my cursor was in the pivot table when I created the measure, Excel adds the measure to the values section of the pivot table. If you look in the field list, there is now an entry with an FX next to its name, and that is the measure that I just created. If my cursor had been outside the pivot table when I created the measure, I'd simply drag the measure from the field list into the values section. And that's it. I now have a pivot table showing revenue per store, but it's only including the rows from the underlying data set where the value in the total revenue column is over 100. One of the questions I get asked is if you can have more than one criteria, and the answer is yes. Let me show you. I'm going to go to the Power Pivot tab, click on Measures, go to Manage Measures, select the measure and click Edit. And what I want to do is, before the closing bracket but after the 100, click the mouse there, type in a comma, and let's say this one is going to be where revenue for that particular row is over 100 and flavour equals toffee. So if I start typing flavour, I can select it from the list by double clicking it, type in an equals sign, and then in double quotes, because toffee is text, type the word toffee. So now, as I said, the measure is calculating total revenue for sales where the value of the order was over 100 and the flavour was toffee. I guess I should rename the measure too so it makes sense, and click OK and close. And you can see now that it's updated the name of the measure. It's also updated the pivot table. I hope this video helped you out. If it did, please give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like more Excel tips and tricks, check out my website at theexceltrainer.co.uk. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. But until then, have an excellent day.